All right guys, we got a GX550 and we're going to be installing the CBI rear bumper on it. So let's get working on it. All right, we've laid out our bumper and we're just going to go over everything and make sure you have that. We have, of course, our main bumper. We have our swing out spindles, our swing out top caps. These are our wing supports that will be bolted to the bumper. And we have our two swing outs. We have our hitch cover right here. And then we have our accent plates, these two ones with cutouts in them. And then we have two that'll go behind them, and we can show you that on the bumper when we're bolting it up. Really quick, we're gonna go over the hardware. So we have some M8s, and these will go on these 3 holes on the side and 1 up front on both sides. We also have these 1/2 inch, really long bolts, and that'll go through the frame and bolt to the front like that. We move over to our swing outs. We have some 1/2 inch button heads over there. That'll be for these 3 holes on the spindle mount. And then we have these long 3/8 bolts that go on our top hats, 3 for each one, with our little pull pins. On our bump stops, we have 2 mounts that'll bolt to the front of the bumper. These also use these long 3/8 button heads. And then the bump stops should come with these countersunk bolts with them. And those will bolt onto these mounts and onto our swing arms. We have some 1/2 inch carriage bolts, and those will go through our frame and our wing supports. And they have some 1/4 inch carriage bolts to bolt those to the bumper too. We have some long 1/4 inch 20 bolts that bolt this hitch cover onto the front of our bumper, and also some clip nuts that you need to put into your bumper. And lastly, we have a bunch of 1/4 inch 20 bolts with washers for our accent plates. We also have this trim that we'll put along the sides here, and we can show you how to do that. But just go through it and make sure you have everything and it's all here. All right, we're gonna start out by removing our trim around here on this top part of the bumper. So we opened up our door, and then before we pop all these trim pieces off, we're gonna pop this one off. So we just got a pry tool, get under it a little bit and pry it up, and then you can work around just pulling up, and it should pop all the clips out. And then once we get this off, then we can start working on getting these ones out. All right, these ones also you just pull out and they should pop out. So just make sure you pull straight and work your way around. Try to be somewhat gentle so you don't break them. All right, next we have this side panel, and this has all these clips, and they just work the same way as these ones. You just pull out straight, so try not to twist or anything like that, and just pull straight, and that should come right out. All right, next we have a bunch of 10 millimeters that we need to pull out of this top part of the bumper. And we also have 2 plugs up here that we need to get unplugged. All right, we got 2 different styles of plugs. This one You just press down on this tab and you pull it out. Here on the other side, you need to push down on this tab too, and then this cam right here, you push back and it should push this plug out. All right, next, we're gonna go on both sides and pop these flares out a little bit. So we have one 4mm Allen right here. So we're gonna get that out real quick. And then we don't have to go all the way around, but we're gonna go up, and there's a push style clip up here. So you pop that center out and then you can pull the whole clip out. And after that, we should be able to just pull these flares straight out and pop them out. And that gives us enough room to work on pulling our bumper out. And we have a couple clips behind here that we need to pop out, and then we'll lift the vehicle up and show you all the stuff on the bottom of the bumper that we need to get to. All right, now that we're on the underside, we have these mud guards right here, and they do attach to our bumper and also to the body of the vehicle, so we're gonna have to remove them. We have 10mm bolts going around and 4mm Allens. And then we have one push style clip up here too in the fender well. So we'll get all those off, pull those out, and then we can start working on some of this other hardware holding the bumper on. All right, I have this pulled off, and we have some of these, it's where our hardware is screwed in, but you do have to pop them off, and we can get a shot up here of the frame. And to get them out, there's two tabs on each side of these square plastic pieces. If you push them in, you should be able to push them out of the hole. And there's 3 of them. Once you get them out, then you should be able to pull this plastic little mud guard out, and then our bumper should be free on these sides. All right, it's the same style of clip right here. And you can see those little tabs you have to press in. So here are the 2 square ones on the actual vehicle. We also have one down here that needs to be popped out. All right, we have 2 10mm bolts right here on the bottom, and that should be the last hardware holding this bumper on. Real quick, if your vehicle has a kick-out sensor, you're gonna wanna unplug that first before you pull the bumper off. We don't have that, so we're not worrying about it, but make sure to do that if you do. So we're gonna pull these off and then lower the vehicle down and pull this bumper off. All right, we have our bumper pulled off, and now we have a few mounts we need to pull off on our main cross member here. These are all 12mm, and there is 5 on these brackets. We also have these down here that were the bottom supports on our bumper, and that's just one 12mm. So we'll take all 4 of those mounting brackets off and then move over to our bumper where we need to cut and remove the bottom half. All right, to pull this lower section off, we have a couple different style of clips. We have these white ones right here. And to get those out, you have to push down on that top tab and then pull them out. And then we also have these black ones right here. And again, you just push down on that tab and pull down, and that should separate the two. All right, on the corner of our bumper, we have a push style clip on both sides that we also need to pop out. So again, you just pop the center out, and then you should be able to pop the clip out completely. All right, it's pretty minimal, but we do have some cutting on this bumper. So we're just gonna reference this little part right here, take our tape, and we're gonna go about the same spacing all the way across on this bottom bracket. And we'll cut that out, and then we'll get a sander and sand it all flat and make it look nice. But I'll go get the cutting disc and we'll zip that off pretty quick. All right, we just put our bumper up here to test fit, and this is gonna be mostly covered up, so it's fine having this. We'll just come in and clean this up and get it all straight. But for our lights right here on our bumper, we do wanna raise this a little bit so the lights don't run into it. So measuring from right here, about 2.5 inches over, and then if you go all the way to 7, that should give you a nice wide range to fit those lights in there. So we'll mark that, and then we'll bring that up just underneath this line right here, and that should give us clearance for those lights. All right, we got our bumper set back up on our vehicle. Now we're gonna go through, plug in our 2 connectors, and then go through and put on all our 10mm bolts, and also that push pin on the very edge of these bumpers. All right, remember the hardware on this. These are the M6x1 10mm. They also have a shoulder on them. So you should be able to identify that pretty easy. Then the rest are self-tappers. So just make sure you get the right hardware in the right place. All right, our wing support is gonna run into this part of the body. So we're just gonna take some pliers and grab it and bend this up. I've already done it. And once it's bent up to around there, that should be good. And then we'll get the bumper and get it up on here. Before we lift up the bumper onto the vehicle, we're gonna throw on our wing supports. It'll make your life a little bit easier. It's these two middle holes, and make sure your C-channel's pointing this way towards the rear of the vehicle. So we'll put it through the button head of the carriage bolt on the outside, and then put this on, and then throw on a washer and a nut. All right, before your bumper goes on, make sure to get your noise trim on. The bulb end of it's gonna be facing up. So we'll start working this on, and it's just gonna go on this edge all the way up to over here. And a little pro tip, if you want it to look better, cut it at the same angle as this piece right here. All right, to help us get this bumper on, we threw in our 1/2-inch bolts running through the frame so we can throw the nut on and hold the bumper on. We're also gonna go in and then up just to make it a little bit easier to install. All right, we're gonna start by putting in all our hardware. We have an M8 up here. Then we also have 3 M8s on the side. And then we'll move on and put our 1/2-inch carriage bolt through the frame. Make sure to leave them all loose. That way you can get all the hardware in first. And after you get it all in and then in the position you want, then you can start tightening it all down. All right, we lifted the bumper and made sure our gap was nice and consistent across the whole thing. Now we're just gonna start tightening everything down. I'm starting off with this 1/2-inch bolt right here, and then I'll move on to our metric bolts that should be 13 millimeter. In case I didn't say it, this is a 1/2-inch bolt, but the nut and the head of the bolt are 3/4. All right, now that we got that tightened up, we can put on our accent plate, and that'll also cover this up and hide it. If you want to put in your light, you can right now. You can also do it before you put the bumper in. We should have these covers that'll cover this up if we're not using that. So let's start putting those in. All right, we have these cover plates for our backup lights. They also have these little push pins. So we'll just put those through. Line up the holes. A little bit hard, but you should be able to push them and I'll keep it in place. And we'll just repeat the same steps on the other side. All right, next we're gonna put this cover on. These use 4 clip nuts, so it's just a square hole. You get one side in and push the other in. It can be a little bit difficult, but it's doable. And we're gonna take our long 1/4 inch 20 hardware and bolt up this winch cover plate. All right, we're gonna put the spindle on the bumper. We took our button head, 1/2 inch bolt, and this is a 5/16 head. I put some anti-seize on it and I grabbed a washer and we're gonna bolt these on. We're also gonna keep them somewhat loose because when we put our swing arms on, we need to adjust them around. So just keep that in mind. All right, we're gonna put on our swing arm bump stop mounts. This is 3/8 hardware with a 7/32 Allen. I also threw some anti-seize on there, and it's just these two. All right, we use our countersunk bolt on this bump stop. It is a 3/16 and then the 1/2 inch nut on the bottom. So we'll get that started, and I just try to center it in the mount and push it all the way back against the bumper. All right, we're gonna put our bearings into our swing arm before we put it on the spindle. Check this area right here. If it has some powder coat in it, you should take some sandpaper and sand it out to make installing these a little bit easier. So there's 2 bearings on the bottom, and then there's 1 bearing on top, and then we also have an oil seal that goes on top. I'm just throwing some anti-seize on these bearings, and that'll help them go in a little bit easier and prevent them from getting stuck. All right, on the spindles, we took some sandpaper to them just to knock them down a little bit, make the swing arms go on a little bit easier. We're also gonna throw on some anti-seize on these bearing surfaces, and that'll prevent it from getting stuck. All right, we're gonna put this swing arm on. To get it on, it helps if you wiggle it a little bit. It'll help it drop down on. A lot of times with this top bearing likes to get stuck. So if you grab a dead blow, and we just grab a microfiber and that helps protect the paint, then you can kind of wiggle it and hammer it down on. All right, and then we'll repeat the process on the other side. All right, since we do have powder coat in here, I took some sandpaper and sanded that down. Also threw some anti-seize on it that'll help it go on easier. So we'll just set that on there and hammer it on. Make sure you grab the right side because they are side specific. And then we can tap this down on and then we'll throw in the mounting hardware. All right, I also threw on some anti-seize on these bolts. This is a 7/32 Allen. All right, so you don't run this bolt into your mount and scratch it. I recommend loosening it up, and that'll give you enough room to tighten this one up. I also put it up on the bump stop, and then we're gonna lift up on it and get it parallel with the ground, and then we can tighten all these bolts up, and that'll keep it in the right spot. All right, we got our pull pin in, and now we do have a little grub screw here, and that is an 1/8. So we'll tighten that down and tighten up our pull pin, and then we are done. All right, we have our latch here. There is a bag with all the hardware for these latches. So we just grab 4 of the bolts, and we'll just put these through and throw the nuts on them. We'll just get them hand tight. That way we can still move it around in adjustment. Then we'll throw on our latch catch and get it all set up. All right, we're putting our catch on, and make sure this radius right here is pointing towards the vehicle. Just drop that on, and these ones will have washers and then the same nuts as the actual latch. And again, I'm just getting these finger tight, and then we can adjust it from there. All right, the nuts should be 1/2 inch on these, and the Allen should be 3/16. All right, we got our latch and our catch in the position we wanted and tightened down. Now we're gonna set the preload on this. So we'll just run these nylon lock nuts in. and try to do it evenly on both sides. And it doesn't need a ton. You can always take it off and latch it to make sure you're getting the right amount. And that should be about good. And we'll just tighten up the lock nuts. And both of these should be 1/2 inch.